love Paris.
That simple phrase has been said in every language on earth, for Paris is easy to love.
Invaded by the armies of many nations, Paris has a way of conquering her invaders.
It's been one of the great walking towns of the world since the legions of Julius Caesar marched into Gaul to find a Celtic tribe sitting on an island in the Seine, a tribe who called themselves Parisi.
Since then, the city has been besieged by Attila the Hun, by English and Normans, by the Axis and the Allies. But life in Paris always goes on. The newest army of occupation is made up of happy visitors from every far-flung corner of the globe.
We come for the food.
We come for the fashion.
The nightlife, the entertainment.
The art.
The history.
The shopping.
Paris is not just a city, Charles V wrote. It's a whole world. Parisians will tell you that if you sit long enough in a cafe on the Champs Elysees, you will see everyone in the world pass by on parade.
All this has made the Parisians charming, yet cynical, and provided visitors don't interfere with their daily lives too much, Parisians are more willing to share their city because they wouldn't live anywhere else.
To experience Paris, you need to hear the music and the laughter.
To touch the history and the art.
To taste the menus of Paris and smell the wonderful odors spilling from the kitchens with specialties from the cooking pots of every province in France.
But most of all, Paris must be seen. The sights of Paris, the boulevards Baron Haussmann built for Napoleon. They say Napoleon ordered them wide so he could sweep them with cannon fire if the mobs of Paris got out of hand. It made a beautiful city.
The Paris Café is at sunset with brightly colored awnings and brilliant nights, from the Arc de Triomphe rising lighted at the top of the Champs Elysees to the floodlights of the bateau mouche throwing their golden light on the great gray stone buildings along the Seine.
The late afternoon rush of cars and taxis along the Rue Royale, and the Parisian pedestrians waiting for their chance.
Trim Paris police in stiff caps and blue uniforms move the cars along with amazingly even tempers. The parade of sleek ladies on Rue Faubourg St. Honore.
The posh restaurants make window squares of golden light, the white cloths and silver gleaming on the tables.
The waiters starched into snowy shirts framed in black tuxedos.
The golden windows of the pricey jewelers of the Place Vendôme. In the center, the great column, styled after Trajan's column in Rome. The buildings, uniform in style, are fine examples of Louis XIV's urban architecture, designed by Mansart. Paris is a mecca for perfume lovers, with scent shops on both the left and right banks. There are smart Paris umbrella shops, glove shops, scarf shops with piles of printed silk, and the designer boutiques, the classiest labels known to the fashion world.
Contrast the evening quiet of the Tuileries Gardens and the lunchtime excitement at the Relais and the Plaza Athénée. There is no more important subject with the Parisian than food. Here, just outside one of the 7 gates, in the wall that surrounded medieval Paris, is a typical French restaurant. To be a waiter in France is serious business. To the French, the waiter is a friend, a guide, a counselor. To watch a Frenchman eat is watching a master at work. The gesticulating table chatter over aperitifs comes to full stop, and conversation continues over a tiny cup of very strong dark coffee. French restaurants consider the patron's every need. They discuss his diet. Frenchmen are constantly on a diet. Not a diet to lose weight. Ooh, that would be cruel. By a diet, they mean what to eat.
Voici le filet de rouget barbé, ainsi que le tourne-dos à la croûte au pot. Je vous souhaite un bon appétit.
You would need 3 lifetimes to sample all the menus of Paris. The city has restaurants representing the cuisines of every nation on the globe. In Paris, it's possible to eat your way around the world alphabetically.
But France is for French food. There are gastronomic temples, Maxim's with its elegant decor.
small local bistros,
brasseries which serve a more elaborate fare than the cafes, which derive their special flavor from the differing neighborhoods of Paris.
and of course the ever-present fast food chain. Fresh shellfish are displayed outside the restaurants under canopies that read huître, which means oysters. The raw fish is served on trays of ice, a popular late-night dish.
French regional cookery can be found all over Paris. The garlic and saffron-scented bouillabaisses of Provence, rustic pork dishes from the markets of Auvergne, and foie gras, liver of fattened duck or geese. Cassoulets of beans and meat from the southwest, sauerkraut and sausage specialties from Alsace-Lorraine.
And caviar imported from Russia, a fine companion for a glass of French champagne.
The French are passionate about food.
And about romance. Wherever you go in Paris, the skyline is dominated by the Eiffel Tower. It was built between 1887 and 1889 and was intended to stand for only 20 years. It's made of 12,000 pieces held together by 2.5 million rivets. When it was complete, the public complained loudly that it was the worst piece of architecture ever put up in steel. Notable figures at the time, including Guy de Maupassant, signed petitions to have it melted down for scrap. You reach the 3 viewing platforms by elevator, or, for the young and the strong, by 1,652 steps, and that only takes you to platform 1. Everyone takes an elevator to the top. The views at various levels are spectacular, and best about an hour before sunset. On a clear day from the highest platform, you can see for 40 miles. The Eiffel Tower rises 1,051 feet above the ground and weighs 7,000 tons. If you go to the highest platform on a windy day, the breeze can blow your beret all the way to Belgium. The Eiffel Tower was saved in 1918 because of its value as a radio transmitter, and since 1957 to send television signals. It's now the best-known monument in France and the symbol of Paris.
After the Eiffel Tower, the most renowned structure in Paris is the Arc de Triomphe. Napoleon ordered L'Étoile and the Arc de Triomphe built in 1806 to honor the Imperial Army. The triumphal arch is emblazoned with statues commemorating his victories at Valmy, Jeanne Maps, Lodi, Pyramides, Arcole, and Rivoli, to name a few. It took 30 years to complete and is now known as the Place Charles de Gaulle. Under the arch, the tomb of the unknown soldier. The eternal flame is rekindled each evening at 6:30. Take the elevator to the museum inside. You can climb the last few steps to the top, 164 feet above the ground, and have a magnificent view of Paris, with all her monuments and each of the avenues spinning off L'Étoile, the star.
You're looking at the most famous 2 miles on Earth, down the Champs Elysees between 2 triumphal arches. The walk from the Rond Point, or Round Point, to the Étoile is now largely commercial, yet its cafes are filled with Parisians and visitors dawdling over a pastry and a café crème, or sipping a liqueur and practicing the fine Parisian art of people watching. Continuing down the Champs Elysees, we come to the Avenue Montaigne, an elegant shopping area. But be cautious. Prices here can melt a credit card. Further along another fashionable street, the Rue Faubourg St. Honore, a narrow, winding street that passes by the President's Palace, police headquarters, and embassies, in between exclusive boutiques.
There are tranquil fountains now in the Place de la Concorde. During the Bloody Revolution, hundreds of heads fell here to Dr. Guillotine's invention. The Place Concorde is dominated by the obelisk, which originally stood before a temple in Luxor 2,300 years ago, and was given to Charles X by the Viceroy of Egypt in 1829.
On one side of the entrance to the Tuileries Gardens stands the Orangerie Museum with a collection of masters including works by Picasso, Rousseau, Cézanne, and Matisse. On the other side of the gate is the Musée Jeu de Paume, with the work of the 19th century Impressionists who studied new effects of light and color.
The statues of Fame and Mercury on winged horses guard the entrance to the gardens of what was the Palais des Tuileries, part of Catherine de' Medici's grand design. The gardens were designed by Lenotre, the famous architect of Versailles, and throughout are statues from the 17th and 18th century. The palace was used by Napoleon III as apartments for himself and Empress Eugénie until it was destroyed by fire in 1871. At the bottom of the Tuileries, on Avenue General Lemonnier, stands the only relic of the palace, the Arc de Triomphe du Carrousel. Built in 1806 and modeled on the Arch of Septimus Severus in Rome, it honors Napoleon's 1805 victories in Italy. The bronze chariot group and figures on top of the arch are by Bosio.
Until you visit the Louvre, Parisians won't let you leave town. It's not a national treasure, it belongs to the world. Construction of the Louvre Palace took place over 3 centuries, from 1527 to 1827, and it continues today. It's already possible to spend a lifetime studying the extraordinary richness and variety of the collections here. The world's largest temple to art and antiquities. The most famous artifacts here are the Winged Victory and the Venus de Milo. There are other masterpieces of classic sculpture in the Greco-Roman department, and in the Salle des Bijoux, displays of jewelry found near Pompeii. There are departments of Egyptian and Oriental antiquities, sculpture and graphic arts. But the Louvre is most famed for having the largest collection of paintings in the world. The work of Flemish,
Dutch,
German,
English,
Spanish and French masters, Rembrandt,
Hals,
Watteau,
Velázquez,
El Greco,
Lurén,
David,
and Leonardo da Vinci. All visitors come to see this famous lady.
A fairly recent addition to the Louvre is the Musée de la Mode, the Fashion Museum. For the fashion industry, Paris is ground zero. Each year, chic and startling fashion innovation spills onto runways from the design rooms and workshops of Paris. Triumphs of past collections are displayed in the Musée de la Mode, with contributions from fashion notables such as Madame Grace.
The Paris Underground, the metro, is one of the city's marvels. The French are not timid about placing their most valuable art treasures in the Louvre metro station. There are priceless works of art in stone, marble, gold, and bronze, some in display cases, others simply out in the open. There are maps in every station, and they're easy to read. Tourist passes for 2, 4, and 7 days are available and are good for unlimited travel while valid. 17 metro entrances were built around 1900 by Hector Guimard, the most important architect of the time. Metro stations have gone from Art Nouveau to moderne.
There are new modern buildings, chrome and glass and stainless steel. Les Halles, once the famed produce market of Paris, served onion soup each morning to people who partied through the night. Les Halles is now a popular shopping center, but you can still find a table at an outdoor cafe. Industries have been established in the suburbs. There's the vast new port of Gennevilliers. And new satellite towns have been built, including a new business district called La Défense. There are expressways along the banks of the Seine. Yet the vitality and old world ambiance in the heart of Paris is still the same.
The Paris cab driver is as individual as the philosopher Hackies of New York. You approach the cabbie at his parking station. He immediately puts a protective hand over the back door. He asks what direction you wish to go. Then he says, "I'm going the other way. Look for another." Many drivers have their dogs riding shotgun in the front seat. The Paris cab driver is proud of the valorous tradition of the taxicab army that defeated the Germans outside Paris in 1914. A General Galliani got an army together and took them in taxis to whip the Germans soundly, protecting Paris. He could be the only man who got all the taxi drivers of Paris to agree to go in the right direction at the same time. Now that's military genius.
Speaking of dogs and taxis, French dogs live more richly than any others. Parisians take their dogs everywhere, and like their owners, Parisian dogs take a special interest in grocery shopping. And dogs are welcomed in French restaurants. The French think our ban on dogs in the dining room is barbarous. In restaurants, the dogs take their food gravely. Dog owners are known to be good tippers. The French can't do too much for their pets. Therefore, waiters sometimes give the dogs better service than the owners. Sunday is the best day to go and sit in the Place du Tertre, Turtle Place, in Montmartre. It's very pleasant on warm summer evenings, too. Take a cab.
If you can find a driver who's willing to go in that direction.
Or take the metro to the Montmartre station. There used to be hundreds of windmills on Montmartre, the highest ground in Paris. The Place du Tertre lies off a cobblestone street, surrounded by wine shops, street artists, and tourists. Buildings sag on ancient foundations. The whole scene is a stage set. Restaurants and taverns arrange tables outside, and tourists and Parisians alike enjoy the carnival atmosphere.
The Place du Tertre is surrounded by artistic restaurants. Chez Eugène, Au Clairon du Chasseur, La Mer Catherine, and others. Artists set up easels in the street. They wear turtleneck sweaters and are artistically unscrubbed. They are a varied group. Some stab at canvases with palette knives and fingers. Others use charcoal or just plain scissors. Many make extra income by drawing portraits on the spot. Wander around the square and take a look at their work before you decide who should draw yours.
Place du Tertre is in the shadow of Sacre Coeur, the Church of the Sacred Heart. It is one of Paris's most famous landmarks. If you feel strong enough, walk up the steps through the pleasant park past pigeons and young people who gather to socialize here. French Catholics dedicated the church to the Sacred Heart as an expression of contrition following the French disasters of the Franco-Prussian War. The church was financed by public subscription, and 3 million Frenchmen contributed to the fund.
If you drive down the winding streets near Sacre Coeur, you'll discover one of the secrets of Paris, the cemetery of Montmartre. During the World War II occupation, many Parisian fortunes were hidden here. Some were recovered after the war, some not, stolen or lost forever. Many celebrated artists, musicians, and writers are entombed here. Among them, Offenbach, Degas, Stendhal, and Berlioz.
We leave Montmartre driving down the prestigious street many Parisian celebrities call home, and come upon a choir procession parading through the crowds on their way to the Cathedral of Notre Dame. The site on the Ile de la Cité has been a religious center for 2,000 years. A Roman temple dedicated to Jupiter once stood on this spot. In 1163, Maurice de Sully, Bishop of Paris, vowed to give the city the great cathedral it deserved, and so Notre Dame was built.
Henry IV of England was crowned King of France here in 1438. The coronation of Napoleon and Josephine took place here in 1801, and in 1944, the Te Deum celebrating the liberation of Paris was performed in the presence of Charles de Gaulle.
You can climb up a winding staircase to the balconies by the great bell towers for more panoramic views of Paris.
The gargoyles and flying buttresses have been captured in art and photos for centuries. In the fictional Hunchback of Notre Dame, here is where Quasimodo sought sanctuary in the classic story of Beauty and the Gentle Beast.
The square in front of Notre Dame, the Place du Parvis, is the official center of France. This is Kilomètre Zero, the point from which all distances in France are measured. Back outside along the streets close by, we see 17th century houses all being carefully restored, and open bookstall selling secondhand books, posters, and art. There's a bookstore, Shakespeare and Company, that has always promoted the literary avant-garde. It was the only house that found the courage to publish James Joyce's Ulysses. When you buy a book here, they'll stamp it with a drawing of Shakespeare's head, surrounded with the inscription, Shakespeare and Company, Kilomètre Zero, Paris. A nice souvenir. You also see a menagerie of pets for sale in sidewalk cages, birds and monkeys, rabbits and hamsters. The rooster, the symbol of France.
The Ile St. Louis is one of the oldest parts of Paris. On the eastern tip of the island, by the Pont des Souliers, is the Quai de la Tournelle. There are views of the Pantheon from the narrow, winding streets on the left bank. At number 15 Quai Tournelle is perhaps the most publicized restaurant in Paris, La Tour d'Argent. La Tour d'Argent is 400 years old. To a Frenchman, a meal is not a meal without wine, and the Tour d'Argent has one of the best wine cellars in France. Stained glass windows honoring sommeliers of the past are made from wine bottle shards. The wine is cradled like a baby and brought to the table, where you have a view of Notre Dame. At the Tour d'Argent, they serve 15 different kinds of duck dishes, including their specialty, pressed duck. Your order will be numbered, yet 2 tables may have the same number if an order calls for only half a duck. It has been said that it's cheaper to eat money than to dine here, but the experience is worth the price.
Continuing along the left bank, we wander from the oldest restaurant to the oldest bridge in Paris, the Pont Neuf. Ordered by Henry III in 1577 for his use as a personal shortcut from the Louvre to the Saint-Germain-des-Prés.
The Saint-Germain district was the scene of violent executions during the French Revolution, which began in 1789. More than 40,000 people lost their heads. Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette heard the whisper of the guillotine blade in 1793. A year later, revolutionaries themselves were beheaded. Robespierre, Georges-Jacques Danton, and Jean-Paul Marat. The revolution was ended, and Napoleon Bonaparte's rise to fame began. With a whiff of grape shot, he dispersed the Paris mobs in 1795. From then, fortune smiled on him for a time.
Saint-Germain was also the gathering place for many of the lost generation of poets and painters, writers and radicals, intellectuals and rascals following World War I. The famous café, Les Deux Magots, is here, the birthplace of surrealism. And its rival, the Café de Flore, where the existentialists argued long and loudly. Life in the cafes is still lively. The French come to be looked at, and tourists come to look at the French. It's a pleasant place to wander or simply sit. To a Parisian, freshly baked bread is as important as breathing. It comes in scores of shapes and sizes. The baker often decorates the loaves with intricate roses made of dough. The French insist that their bread be hot, fresh from the oven. The crust must be perfect, the heart flavorful and rich. Even furry Frenchmen cannot go a day without bread. A loaf of the famous round whole wheat bread called poilane used to make an extraordinary gift before they started exporting this national treasure.
On the site of the Cluny Abbey, you see the Cluny Museum, a playground in front. Archaeologists have a continuing dig here, where they still unearth the pieces of ancient civilizations. Inside the courtyard, there are intricately carved windows and gutters. Pope Urbain, a Clunaic monk, dedicated the high altar of the Church of Cluny in 1095. It was he who preached the First Crusade. Steps lead down from the ground floor to the Roman baths. In 1977, bulldozers working in the heart of Paris uncovered 21 of the 28 statue heads of the Gallery of the Kings of Judah, taken from the facade of Notre Dame during the French Revolution.
Turn right into the Rue de l'École to the Sorbonne. Founded in 1253 by Robert de Sorbonne as a theological college for 16 poor students. The Sorbonne quickly overshadowed many of the great universities of Europe in prestige and the quality of education. It has always played a leading role in political and religious disputes. And in 1968, the Sorbonne was the center of student agitation which led to university reform throughout France.
Many of France's publishing houses have offices in this quarter, And there are a lot of hopeful writers polishing French verbs at the tables of cafes.
Wander the area sprinkled with bookshops, movie houses, and student gathering places. Like the Fountain of Saint-Michel, a popular meeting ground. Or stroll the alleyways of the Luxembourg Gardens. There are antique stores and chocolate shops and outdoor markets to explore. The designer boutiques in this area are a bit more trendy than those on the right bank, but no less easy on your pocketbook.
For a look at what the French call military Paris, the Avenue de Suffren, bordering the Champs Elysees, was originally built as a series of market gardens. Later it became a parade ground for the École Militaire, the military school, built at the instigation of Louis XV's favorite, Madame de Pompadour, and completed in 1772. The Hôtel des Invalides was built by Louis XIV as a refuge for disabled soldiers. The facade is majestic, the door magnificent. Louis' equestrian statue over the door is guided by the figures of justice and prudence. On the opposite side, Napoleon is frozen forever in bronze. The slate roofs of the buildings facing the cobbled Cour d'Honneur are surmounted by horses trampling on the attributes of war. The courtyard is lined with bronze cannon and pieces of captured artillery. The Church of Saint-Louis des Invalides is decorated with flags captured from enemy armies. The last trophy of war is the twisted cross of the Third Reich. Behind is the Church of the Dome, where Napoleon's body lies placed in 6 coffins, each inside the other, in a tomb of red porphyry on a green pedestal. The tomb is illuminated by light from the windows of the magnificent dome overhead. Below, just in front of Napoleon's statue, is the tomb of l'Aiglon, the emperor's only son, who was appointed king of Rome before he died of consumption at only 21 years of age. In surrounding chapels are the tombs of Napoleon's brothers, Jerome and Joseph Bonaparte, and of the great French marshals. The Army Museum in the East and West pavilions houses the world's largest and richest military collections. Colonel Paul Willing of the Army Museum knows more about Napoleon than Josephine did.
At the Musée de l'Armée, we have very many artifacts which belong to Emperor Napoleon I. But I think the principal part of the collection is in this showcase here. And you have here his greatcoat, his famous grey greatcoat, which he wore during all his campaigns all over Europe. The hat you see there was worn by Napoleon in Moscow during the Russian campaign of 1812. The other hat was the one he wore in 1814 during the campaign of France, one of his last campaigns. A famous picture showing Napoleon in the center wearing the uniform of Colonel of the Grenadiers of the Guard. At the top you see this part of the canopy on red velvet embroidered in gold, which was decorating the Cathedral of Notre Dame on the day of Napoleon's coronation on the 2nd of December 1804. Apart from that, there's wallpaper from Napoleon's from the room where he was born in Ajaccio in Corsica, and his handkerchiefs, keys of his private apartments at Tuileries Palace, some of his hunting guns, and also his dispatch cases in which he carried his personal dispatches. And here is a case, a showcase, with 2 pairs of gold inlaid pistols made by Napoleon's personal gunsmith, Boutet, in Versailles. Although Napoleon was not a very elegant horseman in the academic sense of the word, he was a very tough and resistant rider, and he was able to spend something like 10 to 15 hours a day in a saddle. He spent, in fact, many of his years on a horse, covering thousands of miles on horseback from Madrid to Moscow. He had, of course, very many horses. In his imperial stables there were up to 150 horses at one time. And these horses were divided into brigades of 12 horses, which were kept at various distances so that the emperor could easily find a change of horse every 15 miles during his gallops into Prussia, Austria, or Russia. And here you have the Grand Order and the collar, the Grand Collar of the Legion of Honor, which was the greatest, the highest French decoration created by Napoleon himself in 1802. In this showcase right here, you can see the original and genuine death mask of Napoleon I, which was made on the 6th of May, the day after his death, 1821. We have collected about 70,000 items of all periods of military history, mainly French military history, ever since the, shall I almost say, the Roman days, or even prehistoric days, right down to World War II inclusive.
Other ghosts of 20th century artists and writers haunt the cafes of Montparnasse. Chagall, Gauguin, Modigliani, and Whistler all lived and put brush to canvas here. Stravinsky wrote much of his music here, and Ernest Hemingway and Henry Miller found saleable words in the cafes. "14 miles west of Paris, the City of Light, is the most astonishing, the most beautiful monument left by French royalty, the magnificent Chateau of Versailles. The gardens of Versailles, laid out by Lenotte, rank as one of the best examples of classic French landscaping. And lakes and foamy white fountains. The palace was built by Louis XIV on the grounds of his father's hunting lodge. Building went on for more than 50 years as the court grew ever larger, eventually comprising more than 20,000 members. 30,000 workmen and 6,000 horses were employed in the construction at a cost of 60 million livres. At the time, a livre was worth a pound of silver, and at today's prices would be valued at more than $10 billion.
From the marble courtyard, you see the balcony where the Sun King greeted his noble guests. Inside the grand apartments are a series of 6 rooms where Louis XIV held court. In his bedroom, his deathbed is as it was when he expired before a throng of courtiers in 1715. This was also the bedroom of his son, Louis XV, and grandson, Louis XVI, whose wife was the infamous Marie Antoinette.
In her bedroom, you see the secret door she used to escape before the revolutionary mobs could reach Versailles. Versailles was opened as a museum in the 1830s by Louis Philippe, and restoration has continued, interrupted only by war until the present. A complete tour of the chateau and gardens is impossible to make in just one day, yet the highlights can be seen, including the chapel, all white and gold, the heavily gilded altar, the superbly carved doors. Artisans are still employed restoring its splendor. Its original candelabras and chandeliers.
The war salon where Louis XIV planned his great campaigns. Versailles was brilliantly designed so that the movements of the king followed the movements of the sun, or vice versa, so that the king would always appear greater than life, surrounded by a halo of light.
Imagine the glorious hall of mirrors lit by thousands of candles and filled with nobles and noblewomen in their sumptuous evening finery. The king seated at the end of the hall, too radiant to behold.
Depending upon the gods of Paris traffic, you'll be able to return from Versailles to Paris well within an hour.
One of the nicest things to do in Paris is to sit on a slow-moving barge and let Paris come to you.
There are many great and small Paris hotels in all price ranges. The Crillon, Lutetia, the Ambassador Concorde, the Maurice, the Georges V and Plaza Athénée. Yet wherever you stay in Paris, from the internationally famed hotels that show up in the world's society columns to a fifth-floor walk-up, Paris is always romantic.
For Paris is the city of love.
And life.
Nightlife in Paris has its own French style, full of fun and mildly naughty.
Often bizarre, but always performed with panache and high style.
In Place Pigalle, there are quiet bistros where friends become lovers. You'll always remember Paris because it will engrave memories on your mind forever. And your Paris will be different, special to you for your own special reasons.
It may be for food or fashion, art or architecture, history or just for the exuberant joy of this world capital.
We'll be looking for you on the streets of Paris.
You'll love it.
And Paris will love you.
À votre santé!
Stay tuned.